That's me. And back in 2018, I quit my job to live a dream. Spending 12 whole months travelling around the incredible countries of Southeast Asia. But we didn't just pack up and leave overnight. This trip was a real leap of faith. One that was 25 years in the making. This is my story. And as far back as I can remember, I've always wanted to be a filmmaker. This is the earliest picture I could find of me holding a camera, and since then, I've never really put them down. Sure, there was a footballer phase, and maybe a rock star one too. But mainly, it was anything to do with taking pictures and filming stuff. Growing up, I used to make little movies with my friends, and eventually, I wasted 3 years and a student loan on a full-blown film production degree. Because making films is all I've ever wanted to do. The love of travel came a bit later, but there's always been some crossover there. Whether it was school trips in the UK, family holidays to Spain, or interrailing trips around Europe with my friends, I've always found myself taking some sort of camera along with me, documenting my experiences on video and stills. Even when sometimes I didn't really know why. It was just an instinct that one day I'd want something to look back on. You'd often see me about 10 metres behind the rest of the group with several camera straps dangling over my shoulders, or running along a beach with a gimbal when everyone else had already moved on. But the idea of a longer backpacking trip or heading further afield never really crossed my mind. Looking back, I think I was always someone who kind of coasted through life. I had a comfort zone and I was very happy to stay there. At school, I remember a teacher once told me that he thought that I never really pushed myself, and at the time I was a bit offended. I didn't really know what he meant, but looking back now, I can really see it. Even when it came down to some big life decisions like choosing which university to go to, I ended up picking somewhere that was only 45 minutes from home, and it was a small town just like where I grew up. It was familiar, and that was something that I did throughout my life with all my choices. I stuck to what I knew, the more familiar routes. I had a comfort zone, and I was very, very happy to stay within it. After I graduated in 2014, I spent the summer trying to get work in the film industry, which was much easier said than done. Even with a film degree, Hollywood didn't come calling. So in the meantime, I just carried on with my other job, serving up food at the local theme park where I'd worked since I was 16 years old. Working there, I made a lot of lifelong friends, but that was a long, hard summer of wondering how I was going to break into a proper career and start moving forward with my life. Eventually, by a stroke of luck, I got a job at a film studio as a runner, so it was bottom of the ladder, making teas and coffees for more important people than me. And that's also where I met Emma. And within the first couple of months of meeting each other, we started travelling. Just short breaks to Europe wherever we could. And within a couple of years, I managed to build myself up into a position where I was actually quite comfortable and pretty well paid. And I was working on some massive movies, which is something that I've always wanted to do. But it was an office-based admin role. I sat at my desk all day, every day, which is something that I never really imagined myself doing. I remember when I was younger, I once promised myself that I would never end up in a job where I would be working with spreadsheets and Excel, but there I was doing exactly that. I thought I'd stick with it for a few years, gain some contacts in the industry, and then move on to something else that I wanted to do. But you know, you get comfortable and you stick with it, and before I knew it, I'd been working there for 4 years. And I think I was just living for the weekends. I was living for those little trips to Europe with my 21-day holiday allowance. But for me, everything changed in 2016, when I took a couple of months off work to travel around Thailand and Australia with Emma. And something happened that I really didn't expect. I completely fell in love with Thailand. I'd never been anywhere in Asia before, and I instantly loved everything about it. The food, the people, the culture, and obviously all of those incredible sights. It was a proper adventure, and I found that maybe my comfort zone stretched a little further than I ever thought. We spent the entire next month travelling around Australia, road tripping, sailing and jumping out of planes. It was awesome. But I still couldn't get my mind away from Thailand. And for me, those 2 months just ended far too soon, and we both came home wanting more. So we started to plan. We got home, we rented our first flat together, and we started working really hard, and we saved even harder. Commuting to and from our 9 to 5s whilst we aimed for a trip that would last much longer than before. Anything that didn't go onto rent or bills went straight into the savings pot, but it was a really slow process, and none of this happened overnight. And there were times, several times, when I remember thinking that maybe the dream was just impossible and we were never going to make it there. And we both had to make a lot of sacrifices along the way because we really, really wanted this. And a year and a half later, we finally reached our goal, and we made the biggest decision of our lives. When we could have settled down and got a mortgage, we quit our jobs, left our flat in London, and packed everything else into rucksacks. To this day, I still remember how I felt when I left the office for the very last time. I basically ran to my car and drove home as fast as I could. When we started telling people what the plan was and what we wanted to do, the first thing that about 90% of people asked us was, well, what are you going to do when you get back? And honestly, that never really crossed our minds. Because for us, it was just about taking the plunge. Because if we didn't do it then maybe we would never have done it. And a few weeks later, we drove to the airport and boarded a one-way flight to Asia. That day, we left behind all traces of a normal life. But even then, I didn't realise quite how much that trip would change me. A lot is said about travel changing your perspective on things, and it's actually a bit of a cliche really, but it is kind of true. But for me, it wasn't necessarily that. It was, I think I discovered a way of life, a pace of life, where it just clicked with me. Everything just made sense, and I never would have known that if I didn't take that jump into the unknown. We landed in Hong Kong and dived headfirst into the sights and sounds of the Far East. We went on to travel to 10 countries across 12 months, often laying down some roots and staying in one place for months at a time. And those longer stays were the real highlight for me, when we got a taste of slow travel, getting to experience everyday life in places like Chiang Mai and Penang. But then we also got to have off the beaten path adventures in countries like Myanmar, Indonesia, and of course, the Philippines. And my biggest regret is that I didn't work a bit harder to try and maintain that lifestyle. My main project across that whole year was this channel. And when I think about it, I was living my dream. I was waking up every morning with my camera and just thinking, right, what am I going to film today? Ever since I was young, that's all I've really wanted. but the channel only actually got monetized in the last week before we came home. It was a passion project that I treated like a job when really, maybe I should have focused some more of my efforts into actually making money, because if I had, then maybe we'd still be out there right now. And since we've got back, it's been a very painful rebuild. I really struggled to fit back into normal life. So with that in mind, can I really recommend to you that quitting your job to travel the world is worth it? Well, yeah. It's still the best thing that I've ever done, regardless of what came afterwards. And that's why, going forward, I wouldn't do the same thing again. But just to be clear, I will travel again and I will live abroad again. I'll do things a bit differently. I won't be relying on savings for one, because the goal is longevity. I don't want to put an end date on the time that I spend in a certain place. So in the meantime, we need to lay the groundwork. We need to build things up so that we have the foundations to keep us in places for way more than 1 year. And we've already started taking steps towards that goal. We're on the road, but it's not quite time to tell that story yet. So if there's a message in all of this, if there's something you could take away, it's that if you feel restless in your everyday life, if you feel trapped in a 9 to 5 and you get the opportunity to escape your comfort zone in a big way, you should just do it. Don't overthink it, because it changed everything for me. Yes, it's scary. Yes, you'll make mistakes along the way and people will question you at every turn. But I've never met anybody who's made a big decision like that and ended up regretting it. And you know what? I don't think you will either.